Good morning. You guys can have a seat. Welcome to City Church. How's everybody doing? Happy Easter. For those of you that are followers of Jesus in the room, he is risen. Come on. So glad to have you here. Hey, I'm excited to celebrate with you guys. It's an honor to have you join us. Our mission here at City Church is to help people find their way to God from where they are, and we do that by practicing the way of Jesus together in Boulder. What that means for you is no matter where you're walking in on your spiritual journey today, you're loved, you're safe, you're welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Our desire is to meet you where you are on that spiritual journey and help you take some next steps toward Jesus. So I hope that that's not only like it sounds good to you, but it's experientially true for you today. So I'm excited to celebrate with you maybe a story that you've heard many times. Maybe it's the first time that you're hearing it. In some ways, my job is really easy today because once or twice a year, I get to kind of do the same message over and over again, right? It's kind of hard to mess this one up. But also, it's easy to mess this one up, right? So it's back and forth a little bit. But listen, I don't know where you're walking in. I get that for some of you, I didn't grow up in church, and so I remember there was a couple of times where I got drugged to church by someone or tricked into going to church because they told me there were cute girls there, which was true, but it still wasn't good enough. But whichever version, I just remember being there because maybe I came to go with friends for lunch afterward. There's an egg hunt connected to it or something like that. So maybe you're here just along the lines of some friends and you have not really any spiritual interest. That's totally fine. Maybe you're here just to check a box of tradition today. Just one of those things that maybe Easter and Christmas is your jam, and so you're rolling in so that you can just at least call and tell your mom that you went to church today. I did it, Grandma. Evidence. I did not fill out a card, though. Don't you worry about that. So, hey, it would be wrong of me to live in Boulder, Colorado, and as we gather on 4/20 Easter Sunday, to not say that there's no high like the Most High. Come on. Also, I'd let you know, so hopefully the worship and the message and your experience with God today is life-changing, but we've also heard many times that just the cookies in the lobby are quite life-changing on their own. But I want you to know on 4/20, they're extra special cookies today. So that's a joke. I think. Actually, I don't know. No one has. We'll see how the service goes, I guess. Some of you are here, and maybe there's something going on in your heart where there's these versions going on in your heart and mind where you're massively skeptical and you have all kinds of questions. There's also something on the inside of you that would love for even just a glimmer of some of this Jesus stuff to be actually true. So you're kind of leaning in, you're not really sure where you land, but man, there's a part of you that's kind of leaning in. Some of you are somewhere in the middle of all of that, you're not really mad that you're here, but also you can take it or leave it. And then others of us, you're gathered here as followers of Jesus, and there is a joy pounding inside of you because your life has encountered the living Jesus, and he's changed everything for you in every way. And so you're here just celebrating, yeah? All of us. Hey, so glad you're here. So no matter where you are today, to all of you, happy Easter. I'm glad you're here. Genuinely glad that you're here. Now hear me out. Listen, no one hired me as a defense attorney today for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So that's not my job. I'm not here to convince you one way or the other necessarily, and what kind of bearing that might have on your life. However, I am here because I actually believe that the resurrection of Jesus is the most important event and the most decisive event in human history. And it's not because of some family bundle bonus that I get for the more of you that join the club, okay? There's not some promo. I don't get extra points for you being here today, okay? You track, just to be clear, right? But rather, it's because that at 15 years old, the resurrection of Jesus slammed into my life in such a way. I wasn't looking for Jesus. I was, in fact, probably very distasteful in that manner. The furthest thing I wanted to do with my life or my time was give any thought to religion or Jesus or the church. And then my life just was slammed up against the goodness of God, the love of God, and the story that we're sharing today. That's why I'm here today. And many of you are here for the same reason, right? Because this resurrection story has slammed into your story in such a way that it's changed everything. There was a moment in my life that something came alive that has never been able to go back to sleep. And that is why we are here to celebrate today, the resurrection. Now, here's what I would like you to do. I would like to honestly, just genuinely invite you to consider, and I mean really consider, not just, okay, let's wrap this thing up, get to brunch, have the egg hunt, whatever, but I mean really consider, where are you in relationship to this historically undeniable sequence of events and characters that we are discussing today. This is not a fairy tale. This is not an I hope so conversation. People on both sides of the faith paradigm, followers of Jesus and historians that reject Jesus as Lord, both agree of the historical viability of and the actual reality of the events that we're discussing today. So can I just invite you to consider and not turn it off? Now listen, here's what I want to acknowledge today before we get into the text, is that you and I, and this is something you already know, but you don't think about a lot. You and I, we don't make the major life decisions of our life strictly through the realm of intellect, right? Like we have this interesting dynamic of like we have left brain and right brain working together, left brain rationality, and we love to think, especially in the West, post-enlightenment, we love to think we're super rational, and we're going to get all the facts and make sure that we really know how to make good decisions. But how many times have you finished a bag of Cheetos and you're like, what just happened? That was not left brain, right? And you're like, well, so far that's not a good point because right brain doesn't help me make good decisions. Fair, hold on, hang with me, because when left brain and right brain work together, Tyler Staton says that there's this kind of cool transcendence that happens where there are moments in our lives where we look up and we have this profound sense of clarity around something. You know what I'm talking about? It's like the moment when I started following Jesus at 15. I was on staff at a church around 18 years old, and I was wrapping up after the youth group one evening at our church in Texas, and I'm walking through the room cleaning up, and I hear the voice of an angel. And Danielle, who is now my wife, has, because of the prompting of some friends, decided to stand up on the platform. Everyone's gone. We're all cleaning up, just a few friends, and she is singing the song "Bubbly" by Colby Calais. And in that moment, left brain rationality and right brain just transcendence melted into this girl's the one. My whole I was like, whoa. She was singing today, by the way. And so in that moment, I'm like, that's the girl. That's the one. And left brain rationality told me like just to run away from girls for the rest of my life because I had so much damage in my life from relationships. I'm like, man, just never again. We just need to be done with this because it never goes well. And then in that moment, there was this moment of clarity. So I took her on our first date. And we go to Starbucks, and I'm like a poor college kid. I got 2 nickels to rub together. And so, it's like big spender, two lattes, bro. It's a big deal, right? And we sit down, and again, I've already kind of made up in my mind. There's this like left brain, right brain. She's the one. We're on a date at Starbucks, and within the first 30 seconds, I pick up my iced macchiato and spill it all over me. All over me. To the point to where like my pants are soaked brown and I am chafing from milk and sugar for the rest of the date. I mean, it is, and I think, I don't have verifiable facts for this, I haven't asked her, but I'm pretty sure it was in that moment that she was like, this guy's the one. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's really funny though. So I mean, my story is like whatever, but like Danielle swore in her heart, I will never marry a pastor. Ta-da! Right? Right? She just had this clarity moment where left brain just did not win out, right? You ever been there where you had this moment of clarity? Like when God called us to plant a church in Boulder, Colorado in 2017. When everything on the outside, left brain was like, don't do it. Don't do it. That's where church planters go to die. Don't do it. That's the elephant graveyard of churches. You see Mufasa, right? You know what happens. And then here we are. And listen, we look back in a profound moment of clarity where left brain and right brain come together and we say, we never have looked back and regretted that decision. You ever been there? You have stories like that? Where you don't just, like we pretend like all of our significant decisions are rational. And the reality is there's way more going on than that. Can you acknowledge that with me today? Let me give you one more story. My friend Dan, he was a scientist here at CU in Boulder. We met them at the Rayback Collective. Our church was hosting a community night where we rent out the space. We buy drinks on the house. And so they were there just for the evening at the Rayback. We had rented out a space. And at the end, we were just like handing out some free drink tickets. And so Dan and his wife, or his girlfriend at the time, Brittany, are there. And Dan is an atheist and Brittany is a follower of Jesus. And they're like trying to figure out all those dynamics. And functionally what happens is they show up at church the next Sunday. We had just started City Church. And they said, listen, any church that'll buy us a beer, we got to check out. So that was how we met Dan and Brittany. And it was awesome. We're like, let's go. So that starts a relationship journey with Dan and Brittany, and Dan in particular, to where Dan, atheist, scientist at CU, marine biologist, incredible friend, loves the community at City Church, loves the difference that this community is making, is having a lot of positive experiences, but also is incredibly left brain, rational. What about this? What about this? All the questions, all the conversations. And so Dan and I start to meet every week over coffee. And we pick up the book, The Reason for God by Tim Keller, which if you're on kind of exploring your spiritual journey, I would highly recommend. picking up that book. But we would meet every week for coffee down the street at Vic's Coffee because it was close, not because it had good coffee, but because it was close. If you work there, I'm sorry, that was not meant to be a rock throw, but is what it is. All right, anyway, so we meet there for coffee, mediocre coffee, and we would go through. I got a little, sorry, maybe there's some wounds in there I'm not aware of. I'm just kind of venting to you. Anyway, we meet for coffee and we go through a chapter each week, just over like just genuine conversations, the problems of evil and the existence of God and the reality of the historical resurrection conversations. And okay, there's at least eyewitness accounts and all the what ifs. And every week we would just show up and start talking about life and God and where he's at. And over the course of 4 years, Dan and I having conversations, walking through this book, reading the scriptures, Dan goes from an atheist, his words, to an agnostic. He's like, okay, there's probably something out there. I've reconciled some things in my heart and mind to where there's probably something bigger than me. But Dan's words, not mine, as a scientist at CU who's weighing up the evidence, trying to think about how he relates with his other coworkers who are also all atheists and just trying to do the left brain thing. He's like, I don't think I can ever believe in the resurrection of Jesus. It's not plausible. There's no framework for it at all. And I remember after all the work, I'm like, oh. And I remember praying just in my heart and mind, God, I don't know how you're ever going to change this because, right, Dan has hit a wall, left brain, that I can't prove to him. We can talk about it all day, but I can't cross this bridge. So Dan's still part of this church, great friend of ours, wonderful. And then one day, he goes to a Hillsong conference here in Denver with his wife. And at this Hillsong conference, he has an encounter with the presence of God that is so tangible and so real and so full of the love of God that his left brain, rational thinking, and his right brain, transcendent, they just kind of melt into wonder. And it took Dan 2 weeks to come talk to me. He avoided me the first week. We didn't get coffee that week. I'm like, what's up? And then finally we show up again the 2 weeks and he's like, listen, I have been just racking my brain because my world is flipping upside down. Everything in my left brain says this can't be. But I had an encounter with the love of God. And I believe Jesus rose from the dead and he can save me from my sin. And a few weeks later, Dan Zarat, the atheist at CU, got baptized right here on this stage. Come on. That's wild. Now, that could be your story, whatever. I'm just using it as an example of we like to put a lot of credibility into our left brain rationale, which is great, and it's important, and it's true. And Christianity is no house of cards that you can knock down easily. It's not at all. I think you owe it to yourself to do the hard work, the rational work like Dan did. But I also think it's helpful to acknowledge that the big life decisions that we make are not strictly in that zone. Would you agree? Okay. So I just give you that as we make some observations from the historical narrative today around the life and resurrection of Jesus to keep that paradigm in your heart and mind. Can you do that with me? Okay, let's look at Mark chapter 16 for a moment. Just two very simple observations this morning for you and I, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey. Number one is that the resurrection is rational. And number two, the resurrection is personal. Okay, well, that's where we're going, and then we'll wrap it up. That sound good to you guys? Okay, those cookies kicking in yet? You feeling okay? Someone like, I'm having an encounter with God right now. It's a joke. All right, Mark chapter 16. And we'll do 1 through 4 really fast. When the Sabbath was over, Mary, one of the followers of Jesus, who was demon-possessed, who Jesus had rescued, the mother of James, Salome, they bought spices so that they might go anoint Jesus' body. They bought spices so that they might go anoint Jesus' body. You see, friends, the story that we're wrestling with today is not a fairy tale. It's a funeral. It's really important that you recognize this is not an I hope so, make believe, everything works out well. They are carrying burial spices to the place that Jesus has been buried because the events of the Easter weekend have happened so fast, have been so disorienting that they didn't even have time to prep the body. And they're curious as they take these burial spices to anoint the body of Jesus. Their Messiah, who was supposed to be going in the right direction, all of a sudden is murdered, and Jesus clearly isn't who he claimed to be, and things aren't going like they're supposed to be going. and they are heading to the tomb. And their question is, who's going to roll the stone away? It's so big, we can't do it on our own. How are we going to anoint Jesus' body, right? There's no I want you to see, there's not a group of people outside of the tomb on Easter Sunday counting down from 10, like 10, 9, 8. No one is anticipating a resurrection. No one is anticipating that Jesus is coming back from the dead. There's no church, there's no disciples, there's no followers, there's no Messiah, and there is no hope in this narrative. Luke goes so far to show us this. Let me show you in Luke 24, that as they go back to respond, like they get there and the angel responds, here's what Luke says. When the women came back to say that the body's gone and Jesus has risen and they're all freaking out, all the other disciples, they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. This is the Easter Sunday scenario. Do you see it? So we gather like, yes, he is risen. Great. That was not the case for Jesus and his closest followers. Everyone's disoriented. They're scared. They're disillusioned that what has happened to their rabbi is probably going to happen to them. They're in hiding. They're in shame. They're in guilt because not only are they fearing for their own life, but they ran and denied that they knew him in the events of him being crucified. And then everyone else kind of, the crowds around, those who are not like his immediate disciples, they're skeptical of everything. Like, okay, this guy wasn't who he claimed to be. There's another one. Maybe a little apathetic, like just another, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, here we are. Here's what I need you to know. The Jews of this moment in the first century moment that we're walking through, they had no worldview for what was happening here. There was no, they believed in a resurrection, but it was like at the end of the age, like everyone's resurrected at the same time. There was no category for like a single person being resurrected in a moment, much less the Messiah. The Messiah was supposed to be a military victor, not supposed to die on a cross. So everything's being disillusioned for the Jews. There's no category for a resurrection. And it's interesting because Jesus even told them that he was going to do it. And in this moment, they're like, whoop, it's over, game over. Because none of this fits into their worldview. Do you see how interesting it is that even if you can know something to be true, your worldview can block it from being experientially true? Do you see that? It's important to wrestle with. Now, here's what's also important. Not just the Jews, but also Greeks. They had zero category for a resurrection. They didn't believe in the possibility of a resurrection at all. So you have Jews and Greeks, and the early church starts with eyewitness accounts of the resurrection of Jesus and thousands of followers of Jesus believing in him, having seen him resurrected from the dead. And you've got to ask the question, how did thousands of individuals with no category for resurrection, no worldview that could allow all of these things to work together, how did thousands of people change their worldview overnight? It probably wasn't the brownies, right? Thousands of people. Now listen, if you're fabricating a story, your hero doesn't die. If you're fabricating a story, you don't let women in the first century be the eyewitness accounts. They're immediately disqualified. If you're fabricating a story, you don't write doubt into the script. And so when we look at the historical events, what's really interesting is people who are not followers of Jesus look at the accounts of this and said, okay, if you want to actually wrestle with the resurrection, cool. Yes, did Jesus actually raise from the dead? Got it. But everyone agrees something happened. And you and I have to wrestle with that reality. Hundreds of eyewitnesses that start out fearful, but then all of a sudden find themselves full of faith and willing to take this story of the resurrection all the way to their own deaths. Let me ask you a question. How far are you willing to go to cover up a lie? Would you give your life for a fabricated story? And we've got to ask this question. The very government that crucified Jesus on this cross 300 years later declares that he was actually God. The Roman government is turned upside down by the resurrection of Jesus 300 years from this point. What happened? What happened? Why did thousands of individuals change their worldview and ultimately die for this story that we're reading this morning? You see, friends, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, you must take into account the work that we're doing here. And listen, if your heart and your mind it just can't be, I don't want to believe, I don't want to lean in, that's fine, but you have to at least acknowledge that you live in a post-enlightenment, mostly white worldview that is just kind of inclined to avoid and ignore the supernatural. And so if you don't want to do the hard work of looking to the resurrection, that's fine, but you have to at least acknowledge your bias for the place and the time that you have grown up in. How do you resolve the resurrection of Jesus and the events around this historical event and the persons and the faces. The resurrection of Jesus is rational. And Dan and I, we did all of this, which honestly I think is what got him from atheist to agnostic, which is great. But it's not just rational. There's plenty more we could do, but we don't have time for it today. But I hope that helps you just to wrestle. It's not just rational, it's personal. Let's look at the passage in verse 7. It's personal. As they entered the tomb, they saw the young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you. Now remember, from this moment, they don't go, he's alive, he's alive. There's still doubt. There's still confusion. You can go read the narrative for yourself. The Bibles in the seatbacks in front of you, by the way, are our gifts to you. I would highly recommend. You want to do the wrestling yourself, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 eyewitness accounts and the story of Jesus. It's very helpful to read for yourself. Don't take my word for it. But the resurrection of Jesus is not just rational, it's personal. And this is honestly, I think this is where left brain and right brain come together. It's personal in that it addresses the 2 primary problems that I believe every single person in this room has in common. There are 2 things that every single person in this room, regardless of how you showed up, why you're here, why you're even leaning in, no matter where you are, there are 2 problems that every single one of us has in common. All of us has a living problem and a dying problem. A dying problem, as in there is an inevitable end of our days coming. Would you agree? Yeah. Stats are in. 10 out of 10 people catch it at some point, right? We have a dying problem, but we also have a living problem. How do we live and make the most of this life that we have? What is life to the full, and how do we get it? Once we get it, how do we keep it? We have a living problem and a dying problem. Can I speak to you about those 2 things for a moment? A living problem. Let me just talk to you about our living problem as we look at this passage. Peter. I want you, this is crazy, okay? If you don't know the story, it's totally fine. Peter's one of Jesus' best, closest friends, one of his top tier leaders. And right before the events of of this Easter weekend where Jesus is betrayed, he's crucified, he's buried, Peter is in a room and he said, Jesus, I will never leave you. Everyone else might leave you, but I'll die for you. Peter has this identity about himself. He thinks that he has a version of himself that he's putting forward. Everyone else might leave you, Jesus, but I'm in. And by the end of the evening, Peter has denied that he's ever even known Jesus 3 different times. Peter, over the event of Easter weekend, is wearing guilt and shame. I mean, he's drowning in it. Guilt for his activity, shame for his identity. He has been exposed in ways that maybe you have felt before, where everything that you thought you were, the curtain has pulled back and everything you wanted to be, everything you wished you were, everything you wanted everyone to think that you were has been pulled back, and you're just like, man, I am not that. And Peter goes back to the only thing that he knows. He goes back to fishing. Because it's the only security of identity he has ever known up to this point. He thought he knew who he was. Now he's totally exposed. He's broken. He's lost. He's discouraged. He's full of shame. And so he goes to fish. Because it's the only place of security that he knows. And during the resurrection, the angel gives instructions to go tell the disciples and Peter. It's personal. You see it? Now everyone's got a shame story in this scenario. Everyone has walked away. Everyone has gone and hid. But Peter's is the loudest. And it's telling for you and I as we think about our stories. You see, there's this brokenness in the human condition. The scriptures talk about sin. Maybe you've heard the language, like Jesus died for our sins, to forgive us of our sins, to take away the sin of the world, all of that stuff. When you hear the word sin, it literally means to miss the mark. So sin is not just an activity issue. Because if it was just an activity issue, then all we would have to do is kind of lean into a behavior modification, right? If it was just an activity issue, then you could behave your way into the kingdom of God. But it's not just an activity issue, it's an identity issue. It's like a cancer in the human condition that shows up as a rejection of God and his place in our lives, and then a willful rebellion on our part to do things on our own. And so I need you to know this, the biblical narrative does not start with the brokenness of the world. It does not start with the brokenness of humanity. It starts with beauty. It starts with humanity being in right relationship with God, right relationship with one another, and secure in their identity. If you read the Genesis narrative on your own, they are naked and unashamed, as in they are secure. And you and I live in a world with anything but security around our identity, especially in the West. We are obsessed with identity. And so in our brokenness, what do? We make an attempt to restore the value that God intended to give us in Genesis on our own rather than receiving it from him in the first place. So what do? Just like Peter, we go to our careers to find identity. We go to personality to find identity and security. We go to success. We go to things that make us socially significant. We go to pleasure to numb the pain. We go to our appearance. We go to relationships. We go to experiences. Whatever I can use to prop up my value in such a way that you see me as valuable, and then whatever I can use that you would come alongside me and help me prop it up alongside it, because honestly, it doesn't stay up on its own very well. You and I live in a culture where it's just easy to lean into propping up a false security. And you've probably been in the moment, if you haven't yet, it's coming, where some of the things that you've been propping up for your security and identity, they just start to fall apart. They deliver for a little while and they start to fall apart. And guilt and shame normally follow. What I need you to understand is that Jesus meets Peter in his shame and he rewrites his story. Jesus shows up while Peter's fishing. He meets him where he doesn't wait for him, hoping that Peter's looking for him, playing a good old game of hide and seek. He goes to Peter and he makes him breakfast, and it's personal. And they have a conversation, and he rewrites his story. He shows him that the events that just played out over the weekend were for Peter. All the events that felt like a total loss, everything that felt like a total failure, everything that felt like a death to Peter were actually all things that were leading to his life. You see, that's one of the challenges of as we wrestle with faith in God, is we have this idea of what God should do and who he is and how he should behave. And so we have agendas for God. And so then we get disillusioned when God doesn't show up how we think. But one of the beautiful invitations here is to trust in God outside of circumstance, outside of agenda, that even in the middle of a total loss, even in the middle of total discouragement, God is actually working things for his good. And in this moment, Jesus provides forgiveness and sin and the removal of the shame that Peter has been wearing since the events of Friday night. Are you tracking with me? It's personal for Peter, and it's personal for me. You see, Jesus shows him who he really is. Jesus shows Peter how he's really loved. Jesus empowers him to live the life that he was created to live. Pete Greig says it this way: the most important discovery that you will ever make is the love that God has for you. The most important discovery that you will ever make, rather than drumming up your own worthiness, I will never leave you, everyone else might leave, your own false identity, the things that hold you up, the most important discovery that you will ever make is the love that God has for you. And the biggest fight of your life post that discovery is actually believing that it's true. Jesus shows up on a beach with Peter to remind him of what he's been showing him all along. The love of God for him, made evident in the sacrifice of Jesus and his resurrection. You see, friends, our living problem can be reconciled. It can be exchanged for life to the full. And we're not talking about like a place that you go when you die, but it absolutely includes that. There's eternal perspective for sure, absolutely. But it's new life now and forever. Like every day, the invitation from Jesus is where you are right now, you can begin to walk with God again as you were created to. You can lean into his leading over your life. You can trust his goodness and design over you and over relationships and over identity and over security and over career. You can trust him. And what you'll find over the course of letting Jesus redeem your living problem is joy and the good of others and the glory of God spilling out of your life. We have a living problem. And how you choose to reconcile that is up to you. I'm just here to give you the facts. But we also have a dying problem. You see, our living problem, we can cope with that in a variety of ways, right? That's just kind of part of what we do. We're so good at it. We have 1,000 different versions of coping with our living problem. But eventually, our dying problem catches up to us. And that's one of those things that's a little harder to deal with. You see, you and I, regardless of where you are on your spiritual journey, we can look around and we can agree that things are broken, right? You've all had moments, even if you're not a follower of Jesus, where at a soul level, you look at something going on and you say, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This is wrong. We've all cried over a casket and we said, this is not how it's supposed to be. We've all looked at newsreels and said, this is not how it's supposed to be. The harder and deeper questions are when we start saying that same thing about what's going on inside of me. What's going on inside of Drake. This is not how it's supposed to be. The issue is, what do we do with that? That's the great question of the human condition. You see, in the not too distant future, all of us know this, but the title that you have at your job today, that new car that you just got, the kitchen remodel that you're working on, the trip that you're planning to finally get some rest, that six-pack that you're working on hard so you can sup it with all your friends and look impressive, how important you feel when you walk in a room. And in the not too distant future, those things will not matter anymore, right? You know that. When we think about our mortality, we've got to ask the question, like, what's it all for? Like, does any of it actually matter? Here's what C.S. Lewis says. C.S. Lewis says, Christianity, if false, is of no importance. And if true, is of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. Can I tell you one of the great tragedies of the Western culture? Is so many people are lulled into approaching this conversation in a moderately important fashion. But it's because we're so good at ignoring the bigger questions of life. Paul says if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, we're wasting our time. Like, what are we doing here? Let's go to brunch. $1 mimosas at the Buff. Come on. What? I know. That's not a joke. I'm just saying, it's not a joke. Somebody's like, I got to go now, get my reservation. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to be a stumbling block there. All right, let me tell you a story as we begin to wrap this up. I'll never forget. I'm 20-something years old, young, pretty new to Jesus, and I'm helping facilitate and navigate my very first funeral. And in my 20s, my budget is skinny. My waistline is skinnier. And I do my best to dress up appropriately, but I've got very low professional standards at this point in my life. And so I've got some version of black skinny jeans and a white button-up shirt, which seems appropriate for a funeral. And I'm just helping. I'm out there with some of our church leaders. And I will never forget the moment that I show up and it occurs to me that I have a very translucent white shirt. And I have not been introduced to undershirts yet. And in the summer, I happened to get a very dark complexion. And so then I had to embrace, we're here with this family that's grieving over the loss of a loved one, and I'm here in my skinny jeans and a white see-through shirt. I'm basically shirtless. That's how it feels. So I'm it's like Chippendales at a funeral. It's weird, right? It's weird. But no one's excited about it, right? It's just totally awkward. So once I get past the awkward part, there is a reality that I cannot undo. I'm standing in the living room of a family as they pass around cold KFC chicken, and they grieve, and they're kind of in that phase of numb and kind of tears are kind of dried up, but there's this deep bone and soul ache as they grieve together, and I'm standing there as a 20-year-old kid, half naked, not knowing what to do, and having really one of my first encounters with death at this level. And my bigger issue is that just a few days earlier, I was in the hospital at the bedside of this little boy named Eric, who's 9 years old, who had a disease that started attacking his body. And as I walk into the hospital room with one of our leaders, Fred, this little boy's body is packed with ice because they're trying to bring the temperature down as this virus attacks his body. And I'm new to Jesus, and I believe in the power of the resurrection, and I believe in the power of God. And I remember getting on my knees and begging God to heal this little boy, believing that he can, weeping. And me and Fred get up after a time with the family at the hospital, and then a few days later, I'm in their home preparing for the funeral. And I remember standing there, watching all of this play out, and the thought in my mind is there really hope here? I mean, really? are there really endless days on the other side of this moment for Eric and his mom? Is there really a day coming when Jesus makes all things new and he'll get to hold her little boy again? And I've been wrestling with that because my prayers clearly didn't work, and I'm new to Jesus, and I don't know what to do. So here's my question for you. What would you say to Eric's mom? Right, the popular phrase, they're in a better place. Are they? I mean, how do you know? What confidence do you have for a statement like that when you're standing in the middle of a room like that? How do you know? You see, the resurrection shows up in places like that. We have a living problem and a dying problem, and we're good at ignoring both of them. Every world religion gives you a story to believe. Christianity gives you a person to know. The great theologian, Samwise Gamgee, looked at Gandalf after the ring had been destroyed, and he said, Gandalf, are all sad things going to come untrue? And Tolkien wrote that in as a picture of Jesus and the power of the resurrection, that there is a day coming when all sad things will come untrue. You see, friends, if you know that Jesus was raised from the dead, then you can say with confidence to Eric's mom, I know you'll hold him again one day. If you know that Jesus' resurrection is true, then you can get on a plane with me and my family tomorrow as we go home for the funeral of my wife's grandmother to celebrate her life and say, you will be with them again one day. We're going to get this back. And it's going to be better than you could possibly imagine. And with the resurrection, you can say with confidence, these things are true. You see, we all have a living problem. And we all have a dying problem. And the resurrection of Jesus changes everything. So I'm going to invite Daniel to come. And as Daniel comes, let me land the plane with something very simple, but I think it's helpful for us. John chapter 8. Jesus said in a conversation with some disciples and religious leaders, talking about what it means to have a relationship with God, he says, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. What Jesus offers in the resurrection is freedom. Freedom from sin, freedom from death, and freedom into the life that you were created to know and live in relationship with God. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Truth is a funny conversation in the world that we live in today. Let me just give you two perspectives. The truth, a verifiable set of facts. So listen, friends, I genuinely believe that the most plausible explanation, when you look at the historical account of the life of Jesus, the most plausible explanation that there was really a resurrection. To look fast forward 2,000 years for the early church to survive all of the persecution that came, all of the martyrdom, all the death and dying, and to explode at the hands of that heavy persecution, to last for 2,000 years, and to be gathering on a day like today where we sit here together to celebrate and to worship Jesus as the risen King. I think it's plausible, very much so, that Jesus resurrected from the grave. Truth. But I also think that the conversation we're having today is true in a directional sense. A couple of years ago, I started bow hunting. And I've been hunting with my family for a long time, but when I started to pick up bow hunting, it kind of changed the game. It's a totally different animal. And most of the arrows that you pick up with a bow today, they're composite, they're carbon fiber. And so you're not really going to wrestle with like an arrow being defective. But there's true in the verifiable set of facts sense, and it's true in the directional sense, as in an arrow being true, right? For a shot to be true. So you see, for an arrow to be true is that it flies perfectly where it is intended to go. And one of the ways that you prove the truth of something is by using it, right? You have no idea if that arrow proves true unless you give it a shot. Are you tracking with me? So there's truth in the left brain sense, but there's also truth in the directional right brain sense. You see, Jesus says you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And I think that includes the verifiable set of facts, sure. But I also think it's an invitation, friends. If you live by the truth that I'm telling you, it will prove true. It will take you where you are aiming to go. If you will live by the truth that I am telling you, it will prove to be true. You will end up where I am telling you to go. I told you earlier that the word sin, hamartia in the Greek, it literally means to miss the mark. So if Jesus is helping us live lives that aim true, that prove true, then sin is when we miss the mark, which we do so often. Sin is just an honest diagnosis of the human condition. Here's my very simple question for you, friends, as we wrap up our time together. Is who and or what you are allowing to give meaning and direction to your life proving to be true today? Is it taking you where you intend to go? Is it delivering? Are you heading in the right direction? Everyone is leaning into something that is true today. The question is will it deliver? And I'm here today to tell you, friends, that Jesus delivers. Experientially, from 15 to this moment today, I've seen him do it over and over again. And I've seen him do it for thousands of others. And I think he can do it for you. You see, resurrection is a declaration that God has loved you before you ever had a chance to earn that love. And it's an invitation to open up your heart, to open up your mind, to have a willingness to be seen by God, to let that guilt, to let that shame come out of you, just to be honest, let that diagnosis reveal, okay, yeah, there's something jacked up going on the inside of me, to be truly seen, and then know in that moment you are also incredibly safe as you receive the forgiveness and the love of God. Eternal life is not just an idea of heaven that I fly away to. It is a heaven that invades my life right now. You can know life today. What does it cost? The good news of the resurrection of Jesus is that it costs you nothing. Jesus paid it all. Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. It's incredible that Jesus would die willingly in my place for my sin, and that he would exchange my sin for his righteousness. That is available for you today. It will cost you nothing, and it will cost you everything. Jesus says, if you want to follow me, you'll have to pick up your cross too. Die to yourself. Let those old garments that you've been covering up come off and live truly into who I'm telling you that you are. Find identity. Find security. Find passion. Find joy. Following Jesus will cost you your comfort zone and your status. Maybe your preferred vision of yourself. It'll cost you your pride. It'll cost you your idealized version of how God is supposed to be showing up. But the exchange is life to the full. What you get back is life to the full. Let me end with this. There's many times that I've tried to articulate this in a way that I think I could do it well, and quite frankly, I can't get away from this definition. Jesus, when he came to give this good news, everything we talked about this morning, when he came to give the good news, he said the way that you respond to it is by repenting and believing. Repenting means to change the way that you think, turn the other direction and believe, to put your trust in. Every single one of you have sat down in these ghetto orange pews that you're in this morning, and you put a lot of trust in them. I'm just letting you know. Like, they've been here since 1970 and they're still working, but man, you didn't even think about it. You put your trust, you put the weight of your life into the directional decision of your rear end, right? You did that today. To trust in Jesus is to lean into the reality of what we're talking about today, his claims, his truth, his power, the forgiveness of sins. To trust in Jesus, repent and believe. But I think John Mark Comer sums it up beautifully, and I'll give you this as we end. The invitation from Jesus is this: to rethink everything that you think that you know about who God is, who you are, and what the good life you crave actually is. And to put your trust and your confidence in Jesus to heal you, save you, free you, and lead you into the life that you actually ache for. That's the great invitation today. Can I pray for you? Will you bow your heads with me? As you bow your heads and you close your eyes, this is just creating space in your own heart and mind to remove distraction, to listen to the voice of God today, and to respond appropriately. And so we say, Holy Spirit, come. We want to acknowledge in this moment that you've been speaking this whole time. That you have areas that you want to heal. You're meeting us in our left brain and our right brain. And for some people today, there is happening in their hearts and mind this profound moment of clarity, where the resurrection of Jesus is not just good news, it's not just rational news, but it's personal news. That Jesus died for me. Jesus rose for me. Jesus loves me. And for my friends in the room that are wrestling with that reality in their hearts and minds right now, can I just encourage you to say yes, to not put it off any longer, to trust Jesus' invitation, to give it a shot. Let him prove that it is true. For other friends in my room, as we reflect, as we think, as we consider the things that have been shared, where our hearts are this morning, maybe you grew up around the church. Maybe you kind of had an unstable faith, maybe an I hope so faith. Maybe it did feel like a house of cards for a long period of time. Maybe you walked away from Jesus and are considering walking back, or you're wrestling with, or there's this ache on the inside of you where you want this to be true, but there's so many what ifs and what abouts, and maybe there's pain, there's disillusionment, there's church hurt, there's inconsistencies, there's cultural issues. If you find yourself there this morning, I would encourage you not to just have a left brain response to the resurrection of Jesus today, but a left brain and a right brain response to step into the way of Jesus, the life of Jesus, to practice the way of Jesus alongside others, and to see if it actually proves true. For others of us in the room, your heart is throbbing with joy. You're full of life and the power of the Spirit of God. The resurrection has changed everything for you. And I would simply like to bless right now, God, what you've already done in their life, what you're doing, and would you do more? Give them boldness like you did for the early disciples in the middle of persecution. Help them not to keep this good news to themselves, but to share it in their workplaces and with family and friends. That we would not have casual brunches and Easter egg hunts after this gathering this morning, but our lives would be radically reflecting the good news that we so joyfully have encountered today. Jesus, we give you the rest of our time as we sing, as we take communion, as we respond, and we ask you to lead us in our response. It's in Jesus' name, amen.